And in this case, shame on me, the first example was executive committee. Would rather see a name there, but this is out of their plan. So estimated cost, if there's any incremental cost. And then there's a priority column that's top, mid, and low. And you can't see it by virtue of the colors, but the color coding is red for top priority, yellow for mid priority, green for low priority. And then over in the right-hand column is a current status. And again, it's red, yellow, green, and blue. Blue meaning it's finished. So that as you do the plan, that's going to change. If you're meeting quarterly, you're going to update those colors in terms of the status on a quarterly basis before your board meeting. And if it's red on red, you know you better address that right away. If it's red on yellow, that's the next highest priority. If it's yellow on red, that's the next highest priority. If you understand, everybody understand what I'm saying here? If it's a low priority and it's yellow or red, you don't have to worry about it as much as if it's one of your high priority goals. Questions on that?
What were your full status? Completed?
The status is at risk is red, behind is yellow. I think that's what it says here.
Yeah.
If you look on top, on plan. Okay. Yeah. And we can, you know, if we want to during the breakout session, we can throw one of these up off my computer and take a look at what it looks like. What did I do here, Jim? Well, that could be a good thing. We got about 2 minutes here, and we're just about at the tail end.
Is there it feels to me like there's a danger for a lot of our organizations. Is there a danger of picking too many goal areas and therefore having your plan become too complex?
Not only for your organization, but for every organization we do planning with. One of the values of planning is you get all this stuff on paper and you look at it and suddenly you say, we can't do all of this. So then you prioritize and you drop out the stuff or push it over in the 5-year plan and say there's no goal for the current year in this area because we just can't do it. We're only going to bite off how much we can chew as an organization. But at least when you've gone through that exercise, it's on paper and you know that it's something you may want to come back to down the road. And it may cause you to eventually change your vision. If your vision is too far-reaching and you can't do the goals that'll get you there, you got to bring your vision back down to something that's more reasonable. And that always happens in the planning process. And the other thing is, by putting a name against everything, very typically what happens is the executive director's name gets next to everything. And that can't be. And so you got to, you know, it enables you to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is not within the realm of reality. We've got to adjust. It's like going on planning a vacation. You know, you have so much money to spend, you have so much time to go, and we always have a greater appetite than we have a pocketbook. And so as you plan, it tends to come down.
Is it a good idea or not so good idea to rewrite your vision or your mission statement every so often?
Well, you ought to visit it, say every year at least.
And so you might make some refinements every year.
Yeah,
right?
you can, of course, yeah. It's on paper. It's not like the 10 Commandments that are chipped in stone.
You know, Bill, I was going to say, kind of to Bart's question, and also the young lady in the back. You know, as a in my donor role, I think that if I saw a vision statement with, you know, goals that were pages and pages long, that looked as if it were from consultants run by an organization that had 4 people, I would be much less likely to donate, no matter how much it looked, because it would strike me as lack of focus, basically a big dreamer without kind of execution abilities.
If you've got a budget under $500,000, you ought to be able to get your strategic plan on 2 pages, 3 max. And then your tactical plans, 1 page for each of your key goal areas. And if you got a staff of 2 people, it's going to be shorter than that. I mean, you know, you have to keep it. What are we really trying to accomplish, and how are we going to do it? And what's most important? It's one of the things that happens in organizations is we're always running around doing these things that are not important. And the reason that happens is we don't have a plan or a set of guidelines against which we can measure somebody's good ideas. So, other questions?
I'm sorry if you already addressed this. How important is it to involve your board in the strategic planning?
It's a must. It's a must to involve your board. It's a must to involve your staff. At the same table, everybody's got to vote. And, you know, eventually the board has control. But when you're doing the plan, everybody that's involved in the process ought to have a vote. And then the plan eventually goes to the board alone, and the board can say, yeah, we want to do this. No, we don't want to do it.
I ask that because our board is primarily then a telling board. We tell the board, they go out and they do. Versus involving the board, bringing them in, involving them into the strategic planning process, and then going out and doing that together. So as we look at restructuring our organization also, this is going to be a key component for us as we move forward.
One of the questions I had about that is Leroy and I were involved with a planning process a few years ago, and I remember like the staff was there and the board was there, and like the secretary who had been with the organization for 6 weeks started saying, well, I have a value here, and and I think we should do this, and it was, you felt guilty saying, well, who cares what you think, like you just got here, you know. But there is some sense in which in this planning process, the loudest voice, how do you keep?
Well, you got to use your head. I'm involved with a planning process with an organization in New York that's huge. And they have 3 people at their planning table who have resigned from the organization. They have put their letters of resignation in, and they're just hanging around for 2 months until they leave. And it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen because they're just getting in the way.
So,
and so
in the actual planning process, you don't want everybody, do you?
Follow this chart. In other words, at the front end of the planning process, you're engaging higher level people, and you're going to bring lower level staff in when you're talking about annual goals, barriers, and strategies. So you don't have to have everybody at the table at the same time. And certainly somebody that's brand new in an organization, you know, you don't want them at the table all the time. So you got to adjust. But this is a little chart that should help folks figure out who to involve at what time. And then this is just another thing that gets at how much time should we be spending at each of these levels, and who should be involved.
Maybe the question, Stephanie's question, like when you had that sign of like who's ultimately responsible for coming up with the plan?
The board.
Is it the board or the executive director?
It's the board, typically. I mean, the board might appoint a planning committee. Now, there are some organizations that'll say, executive director, go do the plan, and, you know, bring it back to the board. I mean, it's got to be in relation to the dynamic of the organization. There's no book you can go out and buy out there that says this is absolutely the way planning should be done. If there was, somebody would have written it, you know, if there was an absolute way it should be done. Many organizations rely on the staff, boards rely on the staff to bring the recommendations to the board, you know, for the plan. But if you don't involve your board, it's just a major mistake because everybody has to be on the same page.
How do you involve new board members? You've worked this out, the board's on board. 3 years later, you've got 5 new board members coming in. How do you get them to have that ownership?
Well, every year you should be doing a board retreat, even if it's a half day, to focus on where you want to take the organization in the next period of time, next year, 3 years. Come back and you revisit mission and vision. You've got to start engaging them. The other part of board engagement is good orientation program. You know, they ought to be taken through the plan, they ought to be taken through the financials, and so on. And the most important thing in terms of
item of business at every board meeting, pretty soon every board member learns this is the way we do things here.
yeah.
it's not something that's a once in a while issue.
The other thing is when if you talk about board engagement, and we'll get into this in a couple of the board sessions, but when you talk about board engagement, one of the things you want to ask is, how much time are you willing to give this organization before you bring them on the board? What are you willing to commit? Instead of the usual, oh, we won't ask you to do much, just attend a couple of board meetings every year, and you know, the 3 great lies. So here, again, to Bart's point, keep your plan simple. 80% of what you end up with is probably going to be not that important. 20% of it will be the meat of the thing. 10 musts for planning to succeed. Get somebody on the board to lead the process. Item 2, we've said about 3 dozen times. Use our format. It's been used by 6,000 organizations. It works. It's been refined over the years. We continually refine it and make it better based on input from actual field use of it. Use committees or action teams to develop the lower end parts of the plan. Involve your staff, we said that. Give it the time it needs. We've already said that. Point 7, point 8. Point 9, keep it simple. Point 10, if people don't understand the value of planning, they're never going to support it or engage in it. And don't stick your head in the sand. One last question. What do all these great accomplishments have in common? The pyramids, the great cathedrals, air flight cars, computers, space. Started with a vision, people on a mission. They were all well planned, result of collaboration, addressed compelling needs, were challenging, and required commitment and determination. And one last thought. I leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? I guess we're over time, so we're going to have a breakout session. We'll take any individual questions at that point.
I think maybe we should take this break first, and then we should take a 5 or 10 minute break.
Yeah.
We suggest that you turn your chairs around when you get back from your breaks.